Welcome, Dr. Epic here. And in this section, we're going to discuss Giuseppe Fiorelli, the Italian ballet, Pink Floyd, and bodies in plaster. We're going to continue our exploration of the buried Roman city of Pompeii. There's the second part of the outline right up above my yellow box, and let's go ahead and get started. First off, I want to stress that if you find this type of stuff interesting, if you want to learn more about Pompeii, if you find yourself being drawn to this buried city, there has been a lot of very, very excellent scholarship published on the archaeology, on the art, on the city of Pompeii itself. And I would strongly urge you to explore this type of stuff if you find yourself asking questions that I'm not answering. And some of them are very good. The Lazar book, there it is. The Lazar book is like really, really good, especially if you're into like where the Dead of Pompeii, what the Dead of Pompeii look like and how they actually did this. Because that's actually a work of science. And we're going to talk about the arrival of scientific methodology at Pompeii. And it arrives with that fellow right there in the upper left. And his name is Giuseppe Fiorelli. Now, Giuseppe Fiorelli was an archaeologist. He was like an Italian patriot. He was a veteran of the Italian Wars of Unification. And he's the individual who really pretty much moves Pompeii from this kind of antiquarian archaeology of the 19th and 18th centuries into a kind of more modern scientific study. It is Giuseppe Fiorelli who starts to study Pompeii in order to recover information about the ancient past. Giuseppe Fiorelli doesn't want to just find art and treasure from the houses and buildings of Pompeii. He wants to uncover Pompeii to learn about the lives of the ancient Romans. He's the guy who moves moves archaeology at Pompeii from antiquarianism to serious scientific scholarship. Basically, between 1860 and 1896, he was the overseer of Pompeii for a really long time, superintendent of excavations. He oversaw excavations at Pompeii, and he did three really important things that are going to forever change everyone's view of Pompeii. One, he develops this kind of regione system. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. It's in Italian. And basically, he takes the entire city of Pompeii and imposes a grid map over the entire thing. You know, prior to Fiorelli, buildings were just kind of given names. The House of the Chaste Lover, the House of the Faun, the Temple of Isis. But Giuseppe Fiorelli creates a map. He creates a grid system. Every structure in Pompeii has a numerical designation which fixes its location as per that map. And Fiorelli's grid system, the regione system, is still used in Pompeii today. And if you actually go to the website for the city of Pompeii, that's what they list the structures under, using the grid system developed by Giuseppe Fiorelli. The second thing that Fiorelli does is he demands that excavation, instead of being sort of a tunnel here or a trench over there, or that's an interesting looking mound over there, let's dig into that. He says, no. What we're going to do at Pompeii is we're going to excavate and we're going to open up entire streets. We're going to dig out entire neighborhoods. That excavation should proceed basically along the old Roman streets to uncover everything. That instead of, random pits placed throughout the city, they're going to clear out whole streets, the entire forum. They're going to open up Pompeii to everyone. And the result is that the entire city begins to emerge from the tephra. And for the first time, people could actually walk the streets of Pompeii. People could see the buildings and see the city as it existed as an intact community. Now, Fiorelli's desire to do this was ultimately nationalistic. Italy was still a new nation, unified for the first time since the days of the Roman Empire. This is back in the 1880s. And Fiorelli's goal is quite clear. He says he wants modern Italians to be able to walk the same streets as the ancient Italians. And this is why, if you go to Pompeii today, it looks like this. You have these huge open streets. You have these buildings which are just all open to nature. You've got entire staircases that are just open. This is all Fiorelli's plan, to be able to walk the streets of Pompeii itself, to see the city as it existed, to see the distinct communities of the city itself. This is all Fiorelli. Now, that's actually caused some problems in the 21st century, because after a century of being exposed to the elements, some of these buildings that were dug up in 1880 are, they want to fall down. And conserving the surviving architecture of Pompeii, is a significant modern concern for modern conservators at the ancient city. I'm going to take you now on a tour of Pompeii. Now, ideally, I wish we could all get into a plane. I wish I could climb through the screen. We could get on a plane. We could land in Rome. We could have a nice lunch. We could take a train down the coast. We could have some Italian wine. We could get to the city itself and then just spend a wonderful week walking around the city. I can't do that. I can't afford it. But I can show you the sights of the city itself. And here is a map of the city of Pompeii. It's a walled city, that's what the black line is, with a series of gates that connect it to the outside. But there were also a number of extramural communities outside of the wall, and a large number of farms and villas all around the city itself in an area called the Bosco Reale. And one of the things that a lot of people forget is, or a lot of people are kind of surprised to find, is Pompeii was not completely excavated. There's roughly about a quarter of the city has never been excavated, and nobody really knows what's in there. And you can see from this map above, those kind of blank spaces on the map, there and there. Those areas have never been excavated. Now I'm going to take you on a small tour of the city itself. And here are some of the places we're going to visit on our little, tour of Pompeii itself. There's the amphitheater, which is right there. There's the theater itself, which is over there. The downtown area of Pompeii was located in the Forum, and it's all the way over there. Leading away from the Forum is the Street of Abundance, one of the main thoroughfares of Pompeii itself. It's the large street that runs east and west. And there's lots of houses along this street. We're going to visit one of these houses in particular in the next module, called the House of Polybius. And the House of Polybius is right there. And then moving away from the House of Polybius, Pompeii was a walled city. One of the more important gates was the Nucerian Gate. And the Nucerian Gate is located there. And nearby was, of course, a very sad place that we'll visit called the Garden of the Fugitives, and it is located there, okay? So if you want to make a little sketch map of Pompeii in your notes to kind of help orient you for all these places we're going to be talking about in a bit, that's not actually a bad idea at all. Now, we live in the future, and you can get on the internet on your smartphone or any electronic device or whatever, type in Pompeii, go to maps, and look at an ancient Roman city from space. Here is a satellite photograph of Pompeii itself. You can see the oval is the same amphitheater. There's the amphitheater, the Forum, Street of Abundance, all of these things. Even you can actually see the unexcavated portions themselves, which I believe are under cultivation. I think they grow things. Now let's actually look at what some of these places physically look like. There's the amphitheater itself. It's been dug out. It's sometimes used today. There's the very famous Theater of Pompeii itself. That's very important. We'll come back to the Theater of Pompeii. Here is the Forum, the downtown area of Pompeii, where the people of Pompeii would have showed off the wealth and sophistication of the city. And in ancient times, this would have been covered with vendors, with people yelling the news, with politicians giving speeches. This would have been the town square of the ancient city of Pompeii. Here's one of its main thoroughfares, the Street of Abundance. If we go down the eastern portion of the Street of Abundance and look to our left, that's where we would find the entrance to the House of Polybius. This is the House of Polybius. And if we turned right and went to the south, we would find the remains of the Nucerian Gate. As you say, it's not a particularly large gate. Pompeii had lots of little gates, not one really big one. And if we turn to one side of the new Syrian gates, we would be greeted by the very sad sight of the Garden of the Fugitives. Very sad. We're going to return to the Garden of Fugitives in a bit. But there's lots of different places to see in Pompeii. This is just a few of them. And sometimes when the weather is nice and there's a full moon, they'll actually open the ancient city at night. And you can walk through the ancient city of Pompeii by the light of the full moon, which is either wonderful and magical or incredibly creepy, depending on your perspective. Now, you know how I love flying little robots. For the rest of Pompeii, don't trust me as your tour guide. Just fly with the little robot as he guides you through the ruins of this buried ancient Roman city.
That mountain was Vesuvius, by the way. The dulcet sounds of Pink Floyd, a band that at least since the 1970s, at least for the past 50 years, has been intimately associated with the ruins of Pompeii. Now, one of the reasons that Pink Floyd is so closely associated with Pompeii is because they recorded a concert there in 1971. And this sort of opened up a new chapter in Pompeii's history. The idea of using the ancient city, for modern performances. And Pompeii itself has become this really kind of sacred area to Italy itself, and it's become part of the Italian national character. And a great deal of pride is invested in this ancient city. And, in 1971, Pink Floyd, set up a sound system and recorded an entire album in the theater at Pompeii. And ever since then, they've done these performances. And, right up above me, that's the Theater of Pompeii. It's been set up to do modern works. You can go to Pompeii and sit in a theater that's 2,000 years old. And they perform, Aeschylus. They do these Oedipus Rex. They do these classic Greek, classic Roman plays. They do modern Italian opera. And probably the most amazing thing, this has to be just absolutely amazing. I couldn't imagine actually doing this. But the Italian National Ballet will occasionally do performances in the theater inside Pompeii itself. That the place is very much this breathing park that is used by Italians today. It's this center of culture. It's this center of art. And great art, great culture are still being made inside Pompeii itself. However, I said that Giuseppe Fiorelli did 3 things. And so far, I've only mentioned 2 of them. We're about to discuss the 3rd thing that Giuseppe Fiorelli instituted at Pompeii, and something that changed the world's perception of Pompeii forever. Because Fiorelli's most dramatic innovation in Pompeii, something that would change everyone's opinion of Pompeii, would give the tragedy of 79 AD this very poignant and very heartbreaking touch, was something he invented called the Fiorelli Process. So what is the Fiorelli Process? The Fiorelli Process is basically this. When the ancient Romans died during the eruption in AD 79, they would die, the ash would fall around them, and then harden into sort of a soft concrete-like substance called tephra. So their bodies would be encased in tephra, but they're still made up of organic materials. So the body itself decomposes. But as the body decomposes, it leaves a hollow in the tephra. And archaeologists, when they're excavating the tephra, find these cavities. And inside these cavities are skeletons. So what they would do, what Fiorelli began to institute, is they would drill 2 holes. One hole to let out the air, and the other hole they would pump in a very thin, originally a very thin plaster, but they use these very high-tech resins and polymers today. And as the air leaves, the resin and the plaster fills up that hollow. It encases that skeleton. And then once it's hardened, the excavators then dig down and recover the body in its original position. And, depending on conditions, depending on how fast the tephra hollowed, one of the things that the Fiorelli process did is it often duplicated not just the body position at death, but sometimes clothing, sometimes bracelets, sometimes even facial expressions themselves were preserved using the Fiorelli method. And a lot of people think that it was somehow the volcanic eruption itself, fossilized, the Dead of Pompeii. This is not true. It is the archaeological recovery process that created these bodies of plaster that Pompeii is most famous for. And here are some of the Dead of Pompeii being excavated around in the Garden of the Fugitives. I mentioned it earlier. And the Garden of Fugitives is essentially a pile of bodies on the southern part of Pompeii itself. And as you see this, you need to remember these are not, these are not duplications of the dead. These are the physical bodies themselves. And they're the remains of the physical bodies. And inside each of those plaster casts are the skeletal remains of the ancient Romans of Pompeii. There are bones inside those plaster casts. And some the tephra didn't cool very quickly, and they tend to have these very rounded appearances. Others, because the tephra cooled very rapidly, are very, very detailed. Also, the technique wasn't perfected in the 19th century, and in the 21st century, it's gotten really good. Like when we get to the house of Polybius, they weren't able to use the Fiorelli process on any of the people of the house of Polybius because the tephra wasn't closely packed enough around them, because those people, they died inside of a building. But for the people who died outside, who were recovered later, and the tephra hardened very quickly, you can recover an amazing amount of detail from these hollows in the tephra. Sometimes facial expressions themselves were recorded. You can see people grimacing, people trying to cough. They probably died from something called volcanic asphyxiation, in which the ash particles in the air are so fine that they're making their way into the lungs, intermingling with the fluids of the body, and basically forming little mud ash inside humans' lungs, inside the people's lungs. And they're trying to cough this material up, and they're eventually asphyxiating. And this is probably how these people perished, trying to cough, trying to get a last breath before they were claimed by Vesuvius. And this has given the Dead of Pompeii this incredibly human and poignant touch. And you can feel for these individuals, and you feel what they went through during the scale of this terrible tragedy, even though it took place 2,000 years ago. And some of these stories are really quite sad. There you can see right there where these bodies were found, people at the bottom of a staircase, one of these staircases that's like the width of the road. And as you can see, these people were trying to climb up the staircase, in this blinding haze, and all of this ash is falling from the sky, and they're finding it hard to breathe, and they're encased in total darkness. And as they die trying to climb down the stairs, their bodies rolled down the slope and accumulated at the base of the stairs. Right up above me, there's a young boy who gave up all hope. He simply retreated into a corner where he died crying. And there's where his body was found, and where the tephra encased him and preserved his last position for all time, which was then recovered using the Fiorelli process. This gets quite sad. Here we have a toddler who perished in the disaster, abandoned in a house. And you can see that the preservation was so good, and the recovery technique was in fact so good, that they recovered the face of this ancient Roman child, as well as his swaddling clothes and the position he was in as he perished. Here's another pair of people from the Dead of Pompeii. I think this was it's an elderly couple. It's an older man holding an older woman's head to his chest as they sought refuge in the Garden of the Fugitives, where they, along with everyone else in the garden, perished at the end of the eruption. And it wasn't just people that were captured in this manner. There's also a large number of animals who also perished in the eruption. Here is a small dog that died of asphyxiation as the volcano exploded. And the Fiorelli process not only recovered his body position and his facial expression, it recovered his leather collar and the metal bolts on the side of the collar. Because here comes the sad part. No one untied the poor dog. The dog died. The dog couldn't run away because he was leashed to a post. And during the chaos of the eruption, during the chaos of the evacuation of the city, no one untied this poor little dog. And the dog perished. It's not just dogs. Here we have a three-legged pig, which was found in a pigsty inside the city itself. Poor little guy's only got 3 legs. And he was found alone in the pigsty, and largely because the larger, stronger pigs were able, in their panic, to break through their enclosure and leap over
the walls, to leap over the fence of the sty. But this little pig couldn't do it because he only had 3 legs. So he perished in the disaster 2,000 years ago. It's very sad. It's all very sad. People dying in the street, elderly couples seeking refuge in a garden, a young boy crying in his last moments, huddled in the corner of his room, a small dog forgotten, dying tied to a post. This gives Pompeii this deep, deep human tragedy and a deep sadness to it that we can feel 2,000 years later. It's deeply sad. It's very heavy. It's very heavy stuff. But let's move on from there. There we go. Let the kitten take away all the heavy. Let the kitten take away all the sad. We're doing science here. We're learning about the human past through the medium of the archaeological record. It's a kitten. He's got a hoodie on. He's got a hoodie. And he doesn't know what a hoodie is. He doesn't know what a hoodie is. So we've had a tour of the city. You've studied the history of investigation at Pompeii. So you know all about this fantastically preserved archaeological record. We've even answered a small research question about the literacy of Pompeii. So now we're getting to the heavy meat and potatoes of archaeological investigation at Pompeii. And in the next module, we're going to dig into the stratigraphy of Pompeii. We're going to look at the actual hard evidence from the archaeological record, and we're going to use it to answer that question right there. Using the archaeological evidence in the account of Pliny the Younger, reconstruct the final days of Pompeii. What happened during each stage of the eruption? What evidence supports your reconstruction of events? What happened in the final days inside Pompeii? Specifically, what happened in the house of Polybius? And you have some of the information to answer that question, not all of it. And I'm going to give you the rest of that information in the next section, and I will see you there.